How do you capture a consistency from one painting to another? How do you keep the same vibe, the same feeling moving from one painting to another or to a number of paintings in a series that you may be working on? Well, it's not uncommon for artists to line up their panels or their canvases or have them on various easels all around the studio at the same time. And then the magic begins. Now, what I've got here are two 10-inch by 10-inch panels. These are Algonquin Park. On the left, we have Lookout Point, which is Lookout Trail. It's along Highway 60 over near the eastern end of Algonquin Park. You'll need your hiking shoes for that trail. You have to climb, and depending on your climbing ability, well, it's not like you're climbing up a rock face or anything like that. I'd say most anybody can do the trail, but a fit person will climb it in about 25 to 30 minutes. Somebody who's super fit will run up it in about 15 minutes. But if you're like the rest of us, me, you might just dawdle along the way and take pictures, maybe do a few sketches. It might take you an hour, might take you 2 hours. I've done it a number of times and, well, I just never hurry. There's always something different every single time. Isn't it that way when you're walking in the woods? When you're absorbing nature, you get this feeling like you've seen it before, but oh, wait a minute, there's something I haven't seen before. I never noticed that rock before. Or where did that tree come from? I think one of the coolest things about hiking in trails in Algonquin Park is the occasional wildlife that comes along just to remind you that you're in their living room, not in yours. And if you're gentle, if you're nice, well, they'll just have a look at you. Maybe from a distance, they'll raise their nostrils up in the air and just catch a drift and see whether you're friend or foe. Chances are they'll just mosey right along. Now, Lookout Trail is one of the most spectacular trails in Algonquin Park. Now, that's the painting on the left that we're working on right now. It is a pretty steady climb, but once you get close to the top, it starts to level out, and you can feel the air change. Well, because your elevation is quite a ways up there. And one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see will unfold before your very eyes as the trees thin out and as you step out onto the massive white rocks that cap the top of the trail and look westward over the most amazing views of Algonquin Park from anywhere in the park. I've been on all kinds of trails in Algonquin Park, and there are just so many breathtaking places. You'll have a lifetime of memory, no matter which trail you go on, no matter where you go, no matter whether you're there for a short time or a long time, you're going to enjoy yourself. And Lookout Trail is one of those ones that just takes your breath away. I'll never forget the first time I climbed it. I was alone. No, I wasn't alone. I don't think I would have found it if I hadn't have been referred to it by a friend who is my local Algonquin Park expert and cottager in the park, longtime cottager. Her name is Holly. Thank you, Holly. That day you took me for little hikes around Algonquin Park and showed me the best places. We climbed Lookout Trail, and boy, that was something spectacular. Now, there are a few other lookout points. There's the Smoke Lake lookout point, which is not quite as arduous of a climb. Maybe 15 minutes max, less if you're a little bit spry and a little hop and skip in your step. Pretty beautiful view from there as well. And there's quite a few others on the Track and Tower Trail. There's a couple of lookout points that look out over Cache Lake, and it's just the pleasure and the joy just goes on and on. But I digress. Let's get back to Lookout Trail. You'll be standing amongst a couple of real twisty pines up there, and from that point, you look westward and you're just above everything, almost above the clouds, it would seem. Not quite, but it sure feels like it. If you're there on an autumn day, like I was, wow, the colors that just paint themselves across all of the hilltops and the crests for as far as your eye can see. I'm not sure what the distance is that you're viewing, but I'm pretty sure that it's easily 40, 50 kilometers off in the distance, maybe farther. Now, the easy part is going back down. You can just, roll all the way down if you want. But they actually have an easier, less inclined trail that sort of exits from Lookout, and you can just kind of take your time going that way, or you can go back the way you came. Why not? Why not experience the joy just a little longer? Lookout Trail, certainly one of my favorites. And that's the panel on the left. 10 by 10. And what is a sketch after all? It's not meant to be a finely detailed masterpiece with all of the twigs and the branches, all of the little bark chips up and down the tree. It's not meant to spell out all of those details. It's really just meant to capture the essence, the roadmap of the painting, of the scene. It's a way for the artist to quickly render something from first impressions, from actually being there, and bringing it back to the studio. And that's where the large canvases are created. You can see those at robertmcafee.com. And don't forget to spell the last name F-F-E-E. That's 2 F's and 2 E's. Yeah, that's something that's often confused. Now, over on the right-hand side, panel number 2, one of my favorite lakes in all of Algonquin Park, and I think most people would agree, the most famous lake of them all, Canoe Lake. It's just a gorgeous body of water, embraced, wrapped around like a beautiful and finely attached gift wrap. The hills around Canoe Lake. Of course, the famous Tom Thompson and other group of 7 members. Well, we know Tom Thompson wasn't officially group of 7, but we like to think of him as certainly would have been group of 8. But they all made their way to Canoe Lake at some point, but Tom Thompson was the star of the show. That was his stomping grounds. And from what I understand, he would work throughout the winter months at the Grip graphics company in Toronto and save up his coins and then take his vacations up into Algonquin Park, and he would stay around Canoe Lake, and I believe he worked as a guide for the forests and stayed at Mowat Lodge and a few other places where he would canoe and hike and paint. How amazing. We often think of our artist heroes from the turn of the century as, well, not unlike us today. We forget that they didn't have electricity, not in those remote places. We forget that, well, they worked by candlelight if they were working past dusk. They got up there certainly not by a fast highway at breakneck speeds, 6, 10, 12 lanes of traffic. Oh no, there were no highways in those days. The way you got up north in those days was you hopped on the train. The government of the day was just beginning to understand the value of getting Southern Ontarians up into the woodlands. The economy of bringing everybody up there with their cameras and their swimming suits and their camping gear. Oh, those were the days. But if you were an artist, you brought your gear and you sat on the train and you rode it for hours. They didn't travel at the breakneck speed that they do today, that's for sure. No, those trains just plodded along, steamed along, and stopped at every stop along the way. Oh, I remember once when I was a young lad, and I was at summer camp, and when it was time to go home, I once had to take the bus. This was in Stayner, Ontario, and it doesn't seem that far away now. Driving it is an hour and a half, maybe, at the most. But when I was a kid and I had to come home on the bus, that bus stopped in every single little town along the way. I remember well that it was a 7-hour ride because I remember every minute of those 7 hours passing by painfully slow. Once again, I digress. If you were Tom Thompson or one of the group of 7 members or any of the other contemporary artists of their time, you would have traveled on a very slow chug-a-lug train all the way up the tracks. You would have arrived at Huntsville. You might have changed over to a smaller local train track that took the foresters in, the woodlands guys, the guys who cut down the trees. Remember, it wasn't so formally set up for tourists in those days. You had to make sure you had your supplies, because if you didn't, you're just going to have to do without. And Tom Thompson went there every summer for his short life as a painter. And the treasures that we now have from him, well, a blessing to the world. Now, this is coming along here. I want to talk about the fact that we're working on 2 panels at the same time. The reason why I like to do that, and I will often have 3 or 4 panels going at the same time in my studio, is because they're going to have the same color palette that works through all of them. And instead of mixing different palettes for different times, I like to mix up one good palette with all the different colors I'm going to use. And I like to set them up and I like to work on them simultaneously. And then what you have is a nice, well, I like to refer to this like a choir or like an orchestra. You have the harmony of everything that just beautifully comes together. You have that group over there singing their part, and that group over there singing their part. And everybody together just sounds wonderful. And that's what happens when you give yourself permission to work on two at the same time, or more. Listen, I like to help others see these videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe. That way the internet knows, recognizes the algorithm, and shows it to others. And that way, more people can enjoy these Robert McAfee Canadian landscape painter demonstrations, just like you, and hopefully we'll spread the word even more. Now, the painting on the left, which is Lookout Trail, is not as colorful, because up there it's just pines and they're just blowing in the breeze. But the rocks are beautiful. They're peach colors, they're salmon, they're white, the highlights, and then the darker shadows. Oh, it's a breathtaking place. You have to see it. And over on the right, Canoe Lake, well, it's, oh my goodness. What can we say? There's so much that can be said about Canoe Lake with the Taylor-Staton boys and girls camps that every summer welcome kids from the city. They learn canoeing and hiking and camping and survival skills. And all around the lake, there are little feeder streams that pour into it. When it rains, the lake levels rise, and there's just all of these beautiful little streams and trickles that are just lovely little sound effects as you're hiking through the woods. And that is what this panel basically describes. That beautiful feeling of being far away and the soothing sound of trickling water. It's wonderful. I have many times sat my weary tail down, put my feet in that trickling water, break open my refreshments, maybe sit down and paint a little panel or two. Can you imagine doing that right while the water is lapping over your feet? Yeah. Takes me there just thinking about it. And I hope my paintings take you there just looking at them. These are both available for sale. You can purchase them as a set, or you can purchase them individually. Either way is fine with me. I hope that what you would do is, well, take a minute at the end of the video and take note of my email address. It's robertmcafee@gmail.com. And don't forget, 2 F's and 2 E's. All you got to do is just mention the painting that you like, or both of them. I'd love to sell you both of them. Of course I would. And, well, we can make arrangements. I ship worldwide for those that are watching outside of Canada. And within Canada, you can expect your paintings to arrive pretty quickly. That is, once they're dry, because at the time of this demonstration, they're pretty wet. You might have to wait. It's not uncommon for Robert McAfee purchasers to have to wait a little while for their paintings. But that's okay. It's all the more personal. It's just for you. I'll put a little highlight on those rocks just to catch the light, and also to draw your attention towards the center of the painting, the lower third even, because that's where you'll stand when your breath is swept out from within you. Well, I must say I've enjoyed having this time to demonstrate these paintings, and I hope that you'll join me again next time for a demonstration here on the Robert Painter from robertmcafee.com. We'll see you again Take care, everybody. And keep painting.